Welcome to the regular town council meeting for the town of Cave Creek, Arizona, Monday, September 18th, 2023. The meeting is now called to order. We have the roll call, please.
Councilmember Oggerton.
Here.
Councilmember Bunch.
Here.
Councilmember Elkema.
Here.
Councilmember McGuire. Absent. Councilmember Rhodes.
Present.
Vice Mayor Royer.
Here.
And Mayor Morris.
Present. We will now, the first item on the agenda is a executive session, council discussion, consultation, direction to, and legal advice from the town attorney pursuant to ARS 38-431.03 parent A, parent 3, and parent 4 regarding the construction services CMAR contract with FCI Constructors Incorporated for the redesign, remodel, and renovation of the town of Cave Creek Fire Station number 1. Is there a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. We're now in executive session. We'll call a regular session back into order. And the first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I see Cynthia Driscoll in the audience. So would you lead us in the pledge, please, Cynthia? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Saying the pledge so routinely reminds me of being back in grammar school. Every morning the bell would ring and there we'd go. So now we're on public announcements, and I have one before opening it up to the rest of council. I signed a proclamation, Office of the Mayor proclamation, Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas ovarian cancer is the 5th leading cause of death among women, and the American Cancer Society estimates each year approximately 19,710 women will be diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2023, and 13,270 individuals will die from the disease nationwide, including 450 new cases and 320 deaths in Arizona and nationwide. A woman's lifetime risk of being diagnosed with ovarian cancer is estimated at 1 in 78. And whereas due to vague symptoms and the lack of reliable early detection tests, most women are not diagnosed until stage 3 or later, when their cancer has already begun to spread to the lymph nodes and outside of the pelvis. And whereas although the 5-year survival rate for stage 1 ovarian cancer is over 90%, only 15% of ovarian cancers are diagnosed at this early stage. And the 5-year survival rate for late stage ovarian cancer is below 30%. And whereas while a mammogram can detect breast cancer and a pap smear can detect cervical cancer, there is no reliable early detection test for ovarian cancer, and women's lives can be saved through increased public awareness of ovarian cancer's risk factors, signs, and symptoms. And whereas this month, the town of Cave Creek joins all those who are battling ovarian cancer, those who have lost their lives to the disease, their loved ones, and our state's many dedicated healthcare workers in spreading awareness, committing to public education, and embracing hope for better diagnoses, treatments, and a cure. Now, therefore, I, Mayor of Cave Creek, Arizona, do hereby proclaim September 2023 to be Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month, to increase awareness in the community and honor those who are or have been affected by ovarian cancer. In witness thereof, I have set unto my hand and caused the seal of the Cave Creek, Arizona to be affixed this 18th of December, 2023. And it's signed by Teresa and it's signed by me. And just on a personal note, one of my very good friends died just a year or two ago of ovarian cancer. So.
Thank you for doing that, Bob.
Other public announcements?
Yes, Mayor Morris. I have 2 comments, which I believe I can share in this part of the meeting. Microphone, Paul.
Push that little button.
Thanks. I ask that in the very near future, you place a discussion item on the regular agenda regarding the state trust lands and the town of Cave Creek's plan for addressing this issue. Ideally, this discussion item would include the council and members of the land trust in an open and public forum. Critical to our planning, this issue requires a close look, open minds, and a clear understanding of the situation as we move forward. Teresa has collected those documents that we have here in Town Hall, and the binder is in our mailroom. So for anyone who'd like to have a look at those, they're available. The second thing is, you've asked me to invite a representative of the State Historic Preservation Office to a council member to share their work. They will share how preservation planning can benefit our town economically and guide our thinking toward the acknowledgement of the historic preservation goals described in our 2021 general plan. Imagine a self-guided trail map for visitors who want to shop and exercise in our town. They could help with that. I've contacted the SHPO staff, and they're willing to share their resources and experience that they've learned through working with Arizona municipalities. We just need a date. Thank you.
I've asked staff to schedule that.
Perfect.
I'd also like to have the discussion on the state land trust if that's possible.
We probably need to talk in executive session. There are things going on. You may or may not know about that. So I'll take it under advisement.
Okay.
Other announcements.
I have one very quickly. I just would like to acknowledge that several of us went to the annual League of Arizona Cities and Towns Conference that was held in Tucson. It's an annual event that attracts about 1,000 or more elected officials from every city in Arizona. There are multiple days of sessions, learning sessions on topics including planning and development, media relations, preservation, everything that we're interested in Cave Creek. So it was a valuable experience for myself for the last couple of years. And I'm glad that several of us went. Tom McGuire was honored for his service of 18 years with the town of Cave Creek. So it was a great experience. And I think all of us would agree with that.
I certainly do. Others? Next on the agenda is call to the public.
Julie Goldammer.
I hit this like a plain chess? No, it's just gonna,
Just-
okay. My name is Julie Goldammer. I live at 34022.
Is your microphone on? real
I don't know.
That's what you press.
Hello?
There you
Okay. My name is Julie Goldammer. I live at 34022 North 52nd Street, across the street from a proposed rezoning of County Island property. The applicant is Toy Barn. The very best benefits we have in that area are our views, the wonderful ambience of the nature, the flora, the fauna, and our kind neighbors. I want to thank Luke for his time last week explaining the nuances of rezoning and site plans. I learned during our conversation that Toy Barn approached the town of Cave Creek several times over the years trying to get into the town. The town's stance was that that particular usage doesn't serve the people of Cave Creek because the average lot size in town is 2.5 acres. And if we have luxury toys, we are going to store them on our own property, like I have. There was also no tax benefit for the town. So here's my request to the town tonight for this call to the public. Can we please create a neighborhood advocacy service? Here are some ways we could accommodate this advocacy. And what I'm driving at here is to advocate for town residents who are going to be impacted by projects or other shenanigans that are contiguous to town land. Could we ask the Planning and Zoning Commission to take on an added task to support and advocate for the town residents, including in neighboring areas? Or could town staff maybe help, just like they help applicants with their rezoning and site plans? We'd appreciate some sort of support when it comes to intergovernmental agreements, neighboring development, and traffic impact. One way or another, this development is going to have a negative impact on the area, from the concrete, the asphalt, the traffic, the fire service, and drainage onto 52nd Street. And we'd like to have some support from the experts in our town. So here's my catchy little phrase for you. If it touches town land, please will you lend a hand? Thank you.
Next is Karen Teets.
Karen, I hope you can top that.
I can't. I can't, and I'm not even tall enough to reach your microphone.
Good,
Karen
pull it-
Hendricks.
Pull it down, yeah.
Karen Teets, 5042 East Tanglewood Circle, Cave Creek, Arizona. I just have a brief message I wanted to read about the town barn application. And it is proposed there next to Desert Foothills Landscaping. Our issue in the Saguaro West area is that they are planning to have an exit come onto 52nd Street, and 52nd Street, insofar as I'm aware, does belong to the town of Cave Creek. So we do have a little skin in the game here. 52nd Street being an area where we frequently have traffic and congestion problems and things of that nature. So while the storage facility would not have been my first choice of neighbors to be there, it's not an awful thing. It is low traffic and relatively low crime. Julie Goldammer and I have been working very hard with the developer himself. His name is Paul. He's been very kind to us, working as well with his engineers and members of the County of Maricopa. And we have a meeting again with them Thursday. I do want to tell you that we have made some progress with them. Residents seem to be satisfied so far with their commitment to the signage, the dark sky lighting, and the use of the septic, which they currently propose. The Toy Barn has invited us to submit a landscape buffer plan, which we are currently discussing and happy to do. And we may need some assistance with negotiating some setbacks on that. And they are also willing to use some muted desert tones in the block walls, which we think would be appealing if we have to have this toy barn in our neighborhood. So at the meeting on Thursday, what we are going to discuss are the areas where we cannot agree. And that is the fact that these are monolithic buildings. They can be up to 35 feet tall. Now, in their commercial zoning, they can go up to 30, but they are putting an apex or an apron to cover the rooftop air conditioning units, giving the appearance of a much larger building than normal. We don't have anything like that in our neighborhood. I think we have maybe one or two two-story houses. The rest of us are all single-family residences. So this is a huge change. It does impact the views for my neighbors on the 52nd Street area, and I am speaking out together with them on this. More importantly, there is some drainage issues in that area, and the setbacks that they have proposed have been anywhere from 0 to only 10 feet. Now, that is currently not what we have in that area. There is an existing perimeter fence, belongs to Desert Foothills Landscaping. I believe that setback is somewhere around 25 feet. So for them to remove that perimeter fencing and then come onto 52nd Street with that is a bit of an issue for residents. So I'll continue to negotiate, and Julie, as well as the rest of the residents who have attended this meeting, if we have to come to you, all I'm asking is that you lend an ear and be supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Richard Conley.
Yeah, my name is Richard Connolly. I live on 52nd, 33852. And Julie's my neighbor. Whatever Julie wants, I'm for that. The toy barn would be directly across the street from me. I don't know whether that's a good thing or not. I do know from talking to one of the neighbors by the toy barn on Cave Creek that when they built that, and there's only a few residential homes on that, I think it's Pleasant Forest Drive. I canvassed the neighborhood. I went around to see what I could see. And one guy was out there. I stopped, I talked to him. I asked him if they were good neighbors. He had no problem with them. He said that, of course, the building was not the building was on his south side, not in front of him. But even though it was to the side, he said it muted some of the noise from Cave Creek Boulevard. Okay, that's a good thing. I can go for that. However, from my personal perspective, one of the things I like about living on 52nd Street is I get up every morning, I watch the sunrise, and that building would block my sunrises. So one of the things I really like about living where I live, the sunrise and way the light comes in through the blinds and just illuminates the whole house. There's an awning, so when the sun comes a little higher, it's shade. So I'm going to lose that. They're going to take that away. Let's say it's a taking. If I'm going to give up something like that, I would want to be compensated, or at least see the neighborhood compensated somehow. This is a negotiation point, and I don't think it should be overlooked. The other thing is when I go on my morning walk, I go down and I go through the neighborhood and I walk out around Fry's and I come back in through the neighborhood. When I get down to Fry's, I dread it in the summer because that building is radiating heat. And what we're doing when we build another building like a toy barn, whether we're anticipating it or not, we're going to be generating more heat. We're becoming urbanized, citified. So this is the law of unintended consequences is with us. And it's hard to anticipate all these things. Anyway, that's basically what I've had on my mind. And I think this possibility to negotiate if we can come to an agreement. Otherwise, forget it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conley.
No additional speakers at this time, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the town manager report.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. As you know, in our budget, we budget funds each year for the Tourism Bureau. And that is run by the head volunteer, Nina Spitzer, who does a yeoman's job in coordinating that. Last week, she held her annual appreciation dinner for her volunteers. They have up to 32 volunteers now who work full-time hours and part-time hours over at the Tourism Bureau. And so they have their appreciation dinner, and then that's really their kickoff meeting for the new season, which will open in October. So they had that at Crying Coyote, and they had a wonderful turnout, and it's just a great volunteer organization that the town provides some funds for, and we're really grateful for all those people, but especially Nina for spending so much time coordinating that. And she also is essentially the editor of the Tourism Bureau, our newsletter that goes out each month to the businesses and beyond. So I want to thank her and all those volunteers. And they're gearing up for the new season, so they'll be open in October. And part of the Tourism Bureau new activities, we had this a year ago or so. They put together a Cave Creek concierge tour for the surrounding hotels and bring those folks that work the concierge into town. We take them on a tour around the town, and we start out usually with a talk. I've talked before, and I know Mr. Bunch, as the mayor, has spoken, and I don't know if we've had one since you become mayor, but you'll probably be invited to say a few words to those folks. And they just learn about the town, and those are the hotels that are sending folks to our community for all of the activities and the businesses. So we're grateful for that opportunity as well. And then last but not least, I do want to let you know the sign that was damaged at the entrance south of Town Hall here is the design has been approved thanks to the town's engineer who found a place that will manufacture our Welcome to Cave Creek sign. So the design has been signed off on so that they can move forward with their manufacturing. It'll take 2 to 3 weeks for them to actually create the sign and probably another week for staff to get that installed. So you'll see that again in about a month or so.
Will it look like the old sign? You were ready for that.
Just
I
like.
I can't see it, but.
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah, I'll just take your word
The
for it.
little thing, yes. And then it says, welcome to Cape Creek, has a little rider on a horse and settled and incorporated. So it's very similar. Hal took a lot of care to go out and measure out proportionally how it was going to look from photos. So he did a good job. And it's relatively inexpensive compared to all our other quotes. So if this works out, we told them, hold the mold.
Yeah.
And we may fund another one at the other end of town, which we thought we already had. I don't know where that came from, but we'll get a second one. But that's it, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
One lesson. For those of you who don't know, Carrie Dyrek has announced her retirement. So that was the big. Yeah, so sometime early next year, we will have to have somebody succeed her. I can't say replace her because she's not replaceable.
Well, I can say that the mayor and council has selected a wonderful executive recruiter. And I'm confident she'll do a very good job.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda, the approval of the August 21, 2023 regular council meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, 6-0. Next on the agenda is the council discussion and approval of a replacement vehicle for the town's 2009 International HV 607 roll-off dump truck with a 2025 International HV 607 SBA roll-off dump truck utilizing Maricopa County Purchasing Contract 230,200, all right, 230202-C in an amount up to $220,586.39, presented by the town engineer and public works director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We just talked about Carrie's retirement. This one isn't as near and dear to my heart that we're trying to retire a 2009 vehicle that probably has served us well, but we're trying to replace it with something a little bit more universal and that we can use. Our current 2009 truck, it has one dumpster that it can use, and it can only use that dumpster. We went up one chassis size to get to something that would take a 40-yard dumpster, a universal dumpster, so that we could eventually cut down the costs of the rentals when we do like the drop off and things like that, that we could actually go pick up the dumpsters, bring it to town, bring it to our different things that we need. And also it would give us more room in the dumpster because we'd be using a 40-yard rather than, I think the one we have now is about a 15-yard dumpster. We had a budgeted amount of 215,000. This one came in at 220. We had other bids that came in, other proposals for similar vehicles that came in around 260, 270. This one includes a 40-yard dumpster with it, where the other ones didn't. And so we feel we're getting a very good bang for the buck by going to this larger vehicle that will take a standard size 40-yard dumpster. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
I have one right off the bat. Why aren't there any economics on this? I can think of 4 different cases. And this is a hot button issue for me on everything that comes from staff. It has economic implications. There needs to be a number analysis and not just an opinion of what we should do. Let me just point out
Certain.
that we're not in the trash business. Number 2 is it's an upgrade. It's an increase in capacity from what we have right now. 3, there's no information in here as to whether the truck is worn out, how many hours are on it. There's no economics as to how much it's saving us, how much it costs us to do this. the format of the request is at issue, not the decision to buy this. This format just is inadequate for anybody to make a decision on this. And I'm going to move at this point to table this until we get an analysis of the economics of this project. And I'm looking for a second.
I second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
The next item is a presentation of the quarterly financial report presented by the Finance Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. I will be presenting tonight the fourth quarter financial report for fiscal year 2023. The numbers that are presented tonight, I just want to be clear, are preliminary and unaudited at this point. Finance is currently reviewing and confirming our fiscal year 2023 numbers and making our gap and accrual entries in preparation for our upcoming audit by Baker Tilly. And that audited financial report with the final numbers will be, final audited numbers will be coming to council and the audit committee in December of this year. So I want to start tonight by presenting the financial information for the major general governmental funds. And then I will follow up with the financial report for the enterprise funds. So starting here with the first slide, this shows the town's general fund revenues. And the town ended fiscal year 2023 with actual revenue collected of $14,072,054, which is 116% of the adopted budget for fiscal year 23. The town collected $1,942,254 more in revenues than were budgeted. The next slide is a graph view of where the black line shown there represents our budget for fiscal year 23, and the blue line represents the actual revenues and shows the town ending the fiscal year at about 2 million, just under 2 million above budget for revenues. The next slide shows the breakdown of the different general fund revenues. The town collected, the town has 717,907 or 707.9% more than 7.9% more than budget in the local taxes category. Local fees also ended the year above budget at 126,076 or 13.6% above budget due to building permit and planning and zoning fee revenues coming in higher than projected. State revenues for the year came in just above budget in total at $1,943,934 or 103.6% of budget. And miscellaneous revenues ended the year above budget due to the insurance recovery monies in the amount of $85,575 received from the insurance company for weather damage that had occurred at the rodeo grounds. And interest income ended the year significantly above budget at $971,861. And that was due to increased interest rates that we had earned on our town investments. When the budget was originally done for 2023, interest rates were significantly low, but those have turned around and we significantly exceeded our our interest income.
What
Budget.
What balance do we have that is generating this interest? You recall
The,
approximately?
yeah, let me look for you. No, I don't have that balance sheet. I don't have that,
Okay. Well, I'll get
number
that
in
later.
front of me. I just have the P and L. I don't have the balance sheet in front of me for that.
Mitzi,
But I can get that information to you.
when you say state revenues of 1.9, are those state shared revenues?
Those are state shared revenues. So those include the categories of the state revenue sharing, auto and lieu tax, and also the state sales tax.
Okay.
Those,
How is that based? Is that on population?
it's yes. We get a percentage of our population based on the total for the cities and towns
Okay.
and
Very
states.
good. Thank you. Oh. Ernie's mumbling over here.
The comment here is we do get it and our population, our census was, maybe you'd want to explain that, Gary. It was terrible.
Well, Mayor, members of council, I don't have the exact numbers, but we were pushing 6,000 in our, prior to the census. So we expected to come in well over 6,000 in our population. And it in fact went down. But when you look at the houses that were built and, houses weren't demolished, there's more people here than actually completed the census essentially. So it went
And
down
would
by
you say-
several hundred.
Wouldn't you say it's important to keep taxes low and services up for people to fill the census out and try to?
Yeah, it's very important because population counts when the state shared revenues and other things are calculated based on our population.
Okay, so the next slide is a pie graph of the town's revenues for fiscal year 2023, which basically shows the local tax of all the revenues received. The local tax category was 70%, followed by the state shared revenues of 14% of our pie, and local fees, interest income, both coming in at 7%. And miscellaneous revenue representing 2% of the total.
Mitzi,
Yes,
just for clarification.
yes.
What comprises local tax?
Local taxes are the town sales tax, construction sales tax, and our payments in lieu that we receive from APS and Southwest Gas.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. And bed tax?
That is part of the sales tax. The town sales tax is included in that number. Any other questions on that? No.
Yes, one last question.
Yes.
What's the current sales tax percentage for Cape Creek?
3%.
3%.
Mhm.
Okay.
So state and county is 6.3 and town of Cape Creek is 3.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to move, staying in the general fund, we're moving from revenues over to the expenditure side. And this next slide shows our operating expenditures by department. And through the fourth quarter for fiscal year 2023, all of our general fund departments ended the year below their budgets, with total operating expenditures for the year at 90.7% of budget for all of our general fund departments.
Could you go back to that slide? real
Sure.
quick? I was just looking to see who was the lowest, who didn't spend their money. And
Special events, which is the rodeo and the parades, but
and then
that
next
was
to that was the
under-
attorney. And I guess that's good news, right?
the attorney was, yep, the attorney, yeah, was
Mayor,
At
Vice Mayor,
33.7.
actually at the time of creation of the budget, there were additional funds budgeted at that time. There were some things that were
For the legal
unknown
department?
for our legal, so we had additional funds in there
I see.
that were budgeted.
So typically 350,000 is not the budget.
It should go down. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It will go down.
Who said that? I guess the attorney's on the line somewhere. He was on the line.
Okay, so also staying within the general fund, we're moving from operating then over to capital expenditures by department. And for the fourth quarter and through fiscal year 2023, all of our general fund department capital expenditures also ended the year below budget. And this was mainly due to projects that were budgeted, but not fully expended or completed before the end of the year. And in showing on there, the biggest one is the public safety, fire and emergency, which was for the, we had budgeted for the fire station remodel. And Jim had worked on getting the design and stuff done, but the construction actually hadn't started. So that project will be rolling forward into fiscal year 2024. So overall, the general fund ended the year above budget on revenues and below budget on expenditures, and in good financial condition shape for fiscal year 2023.
I'm just estimating that quickly at about $5 million better than budget.
Yes.
2 million higher revenue, which 1 million was interest. Underspent by $1 million on general fund and didn't spend 2 million on capital. So
Capital.
that's just a delay. It's not really a savings. Yeah.
Correct. Okay, so in looking at the other major general government funds, here on the next slide, we'll start with the HERF, the Highway User Revenue Fund. The town received for fiscal year 2023, 373,000 or 96.1% of budget in the revenue category there. And the expenditures in HERF for fiscal year 23 were 309,931 or 68.9% of budget for fiscal year 2023. Our other major other governmental fund was Spur Cross, and Spur Cross received 1,833,496 or 119.5% of budget in local. That was mostly due to local taxes. We had also received more, as similar to the general fund. Spur Cross also receives a portion of those taxes, and so that also came in over budget. And on the expenditure side for Spur Cross, we ended the year at 216,000, which was the amount of our contract with Maricopa County for administration of the Spur Cross Park. And that was the amount of our contract, and that's the amount that was budgeted. So that came in right on target at 100%.
Missy, I have a question, and you may not have the answer to this, but how long is that contract with Maricopa County?
Carrie? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to stump the state.
Okay. Here, Mayor, Vice Mayor, we will be entering into discussions and we'll renegotiate that contract very soon.
Oh, see,
We need to, well, I don't know that that is necessarily because it's expiring. We have some things that we need to update, both on the contract side and on the master plan side, that we are not going to be building all those things that were designed in the master plan many years ago. And they need to better align themselves with what the master plan should say, what we're actually going to do. And the contract should say we're going to do things that the master plan comes. So we've been talking about that for a long time. And the director, RJ Carton, and I have had a conversation about that in the last couple of months. So it's just getting it on the docket and getting going, but we need to work on that.
Are we going to get that done before you leave, Carrie?
It'll be well underway.
Very good. And you know, it's really hot in here. You guys agree?
Second.
All those in favor?
Yeah. Thank you, Karen.
Okay, so moving from general government to our enterprise funds. The first enterprise fund we're going to cover is the wastewater fund. Revenues collected exceeded the budget at fiscal year end by 459,839 or 116.9% of budget. Local sales taxes and sewer user fees ended the fiscal year higher than was originally projected. And those revenues included half the year of the new council adopted sewer rates in that 3.1 million there represented in the actual revenues. Operating expenditures ended the fiscal year at $1,544,575, which was slightly above budget. Capital project expenses of $101,583 for wastewater were under budget, and debt service expenses of principal and interest were $1,894,575 for fiscal year 2023. The inlet screen replacement and the headworks and basin repairs, collection system repairs, and the manhole rehab projects, along with the continuation of the integrated utility master plan for the wastewater treatment plant, accounted for the 81.3% of the capital project budget expensed for the fiscal year.
To me, that appears as that the subsidy from the general fund is down to about $1 million from $2.5 million just a few years ago. So that we've really cut into the amount of money.
Yes, as
subsidized.
soon as we get through our audit, we'll come back to council with that final number, probably the end of October, maybe the beginning of November. So we'll bring those final numbers once we get the numbers that are audited and we get the sign off from Baker Tilly on that. Bring that back.
That could be good news.
Yes. Okay, and this next slide is just the pie chart of the wastewater revenues and expenditures, showing the total and a graphical picture of what we've got in each bucket there. Moving on to Cave Creek Water, which is shown here next. Revenues collected for fiscal year 2023 were $5,384,053 or 113% of the revenue budget without including the grant revenues or transfers from other funds. Cave Creek Water additionally received the state and local fiscal recovery funds from the grant fund in fiscal year 2023 in the amount of the $1,949,777. This revenue is now 100% of the budget and will be spent on capital expenses related to the Phoenix Interconnect project starting on July 1st of 2023 for fiscal year 2024. Operating expenditures ended the fiscal year at $3,726,811, which was slightly above budget, and capital expenditures below budget at $706,046 or 69.4% of budget. The water meter replacement and plant maintenance capital projects, along with the continuation of the integrated utility master plan for the water treatment plant and the purchase of the hydrovac trailer and backhoe, account for the 69.4% that's expensed there in the capital projects category. The Phoenix Interconnect project expenses ended the fiscal year at $1,154,139 or 59.2% of budget. And the debt service expenses of principal and interest were $2,344,000 for fiscal year 2023. And shown above budget on this slide due to the debt service budget allocation that was in place in fiscal year 2023. The next slide here shows the graph presentation of the Cave Creek water revenues and expenses year to date by the different categories. And then our last enterprise fund, which is shown here next, is the Desert Hills Water Company. It shows revenues year to date at $3,223,130 or 92.6% of budget. The water usage fees came in slightly below the budgeted projection. Operating expenses came in, operating expenses came in at $2,154,168 and are tracking slightly above budget, and capital expenditures for Desert Hills ended the year at $128,707 or 57.2% of budget. The annual pipeline improvement program project, along with the continuation of the utility, the integrated utility master plan for the Desert Hills Water, accounts for the capital expenditure amount there shown to date. Debt service expenses of principal and interest were $851,799 for fiscal year 2023 and shown below the debt service budget that is presented there, also due to the debt service budget allocation that was in place for 2022. So it's over in Cave Creek, but under in Desert Hills. This next slide is the graphical presentation for Desert Hills Water Company of the revenues and the different expense categories. And then the final slide for the presentation tonight is just the debt overview slide. We made our 7/1/2023 debt service payments. And this is the slide that shows where our, for each of our enterprise funds, where our debt originally started and after we made the 7/1 debt service payment where we ended. So the outstanding principal after the 7/1/2023 debt service payment is currently just under 21 million, with all debt service currently in place at that point in time to be extinguished by 2023.
By
2030.
2030.
We're in 2023,
darn.
2030.
Yeah.
Yes.
2030.
And that's with the debt service that is currently in place. Obviously, we'll have the WIFA as we spend down that loan come on, but where we stand at that point in time, all debt service is to be extinguished by 2030.
That's currently estimated at 13 million. That's a lot lower than 66 million we started with. So
That's correct.
I think
Made good progress.
we're still on the same very, very good financial trajectory. I'll use that term everywhere I look here. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so this is all I have for the fourth quarter financial report. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Questions from council?
Yeah, if you could get us, get all the members of the council, what the current fund budgets are, or not budgets, but what we have in the bank right now, that'd be great.
Sure. Can do that. You mean the cash balance for the investments?
Yes.
Yes, we can do that.
Very
that
good.
tomorrow.
Compliments to the staff.
Okay.
Good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Missy, good job. I'm glad the lions didn't eat you in Africa.
Yeah.
Me too.
All right, let's see. The next thing on the agenda is council discussion approval of resolution R 2023-19, a resolution of the mayor and town council of the town of Cave Creek identifying and recognizing 5 significant places in Cave Creek, further encouraging residents and visitors to support the places that make Cave Creek unique through the local landmarks program presented by the Development Services Director.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Mayor, with your permission, the next 2 items both are related to the local landmarks. I'm going to kind of do a history and talk about them both simultaneously, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Thank you. Local Landmarks was officially launched as a pilot program by the town council in December of 2020 by resolution R 2020-29, which recognized the first 6 locations. Those were Harold's, Hideaway, Big Earl's, Oregano's, Dairy Queen, and the Trading Post. The town coordinated with those locations as well as with Evelyn Johnson, who's with the Cave Creek Museum through 2021 to develop content, order bronze plaques, and schedule presentations. The town was fortunate to have Kelly Francis Brown on staff to dedicate considerable energy to get the project going in that pilot year. The program was extended by Town Council Resolution R 2022-01 in January of 2022, recognizing an additional 10 locations, those being Black Mountain Feed, the Buffalo Chip, Indian Village, El Encanto, Horny Toad, Les Sans Souci, American Legion Post 34, Desert Foothills Library, Cave Creek Museum, and Frontier Town. To date, 9 of those locations have been awarded their plaques beginning last September with the American Legion and being completed last month with Les Sans Souci. The owner of Frontier Town contacted the town wishing not to proceed as a member of the program at this time. We'll follow up with the Pegler family and see how that progresses. From the outset of the program, the Cave Creek Museum has been integral to the selection of the locations, providing location content and participating in the recognition ceremonies for the locations. They've kind of been our quality control for content and everything that's produced and put on bronze. We want to make sure is accurate before we order those plaques and put them on buildings. This evening, the town council will consider recognizing an additional 5 locations that contribute to the character of the town, those being Cave Creek Regional Park, Spur Cross Ranch Conservation Area, Black Mountain Preserve, Desert Awareness Park, and the Cave Creek Memorial Arena, which would bring the total program portfolio to 20 recognized local landmark locations. The program has arrived at a place where the Cave Creek Museum is able to assume responsibility of completing the awarding of remaining locations and working with the Tourism Bureau to develop marketing specific to Cave Creek's local landmarks, really promoting the program. Kelly is now on staff for the Cave Creek Museum, and her knowledge of the program makes the museum an ideal caretaker for the local landmarks moving forward. Obvious to most, the program does come with a cost. So budgetary consideration would be determined and ultimately approved by the town council during its budget adoption process each fiscal year in order to continue its support for the program. We've already kind of spoken to the director of the Cave Creek Museum, as soon as recent as earlier this evening, talking about how many more landmarks would be identified, what that ongoing promotion may look like, just in loose terms for a budget. And it's something that would be discussed with council through the budget adoption process each year. Those numbers will change. Should council approve these resolutions this evening, plaques will be ordered for the 5 public parks previously mentioned, and staff will coordinate the transfer of the program to the Cave Creek Museum. And that's all I have to report. Thank you, Mayor.
Questions on either issue from council?
No question.
There's public comment on this.
No input for this item, Mayor.
I'm sorry.
No input for this
No
item.
input. Okay, then we are ready for, we have 2 motions. So I guess we'll start with number 1, and then when that's finished, we'll go to number 2.
Motion to approve a resolution R 2023-19, a resolution of the mayor and town council of the town of Cave Creek, Maricopa County, Arizona, identifying 5 significant places in Cave Creek, further encouraging residents and visitors to support the places that make Cave Creek unique through the local landmarks program.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it 6-0. Mr. Elkin, would you like to make number 2?
I would.
All right.
Thank you. Council action needed is a motion to approve the resolution R 2023-20, A resolution of the mayor and town council of the town of Cave Creek transferring the administration of the local landmark program to the Cave Creek Museum located in Cave Creek to further the program that encourages residents and visitors to support the places that make Cave Creek unique.
Second. Second. Did you? Or were you asking?
Yeah, take point.
Okay.
Comments?
I have a comment, a brief one. The mission statement of the Cave Creek Museum is to preserve the artifacts related to the prehistory, history, and culture of the Cave Creek Carefree Foothills. The town of Cave Creek already supports the museum in significant ways. Our work with the museum will only grow as our history and unique location continues to attract tourists. Specifically, and in consultation with the town, the museum will assume the process for nomination and selection of the landmarks. There are two other elements for consideration that must be mentioned in this process. Each landmark plaque has a QR code image. These QR images are designed to link to the town website and lead the viewer to our video library and a deeper written narrative describing the significance of that landmark. This system needs to be completed, and that work must reside with the town. Linking the landmarks to the town digitally has two features. Our history is celebrated, and we move our trail system into an enhanced space of economic development. When trail loops are identified, trail users will enjoy our deep history, our spectacular trail setting, and information about the businesses and services along the paths. Moving this very visible and educational preservation program to the museum and following it with financial support will build respect for our community heritage, offer us a level of management for where we want our visitors to be, and support for the business community we serve.
Vice Mayor, you had the second?
I would just like to thank the Cave Creek Museum and Evelyn in particular for spearheading this project and taking the lead on it and promoting it in various media. Because I think it's just as Paul said, it's very important in this community to recognize our history and other important buildings within our town. And you've done a very good job, and we gladly hand it over to you. Thank you.
Other comments from council? My only comment, I was there Saturday night. Yeah, Saturday night, and lots of new exhibits, very good exhibits and interesting exhibits. So I urge everybody to go see the museum. It's going to open October. Yeah. Been a lot of work since it closed at the start of last summer.
I also read that you're looking for new board members.
Will be, yes.
Yes,
We're
well,
always looking for candidates that I can hold and train.
yes, well, I just thought I'd mention it for anybody in this audience who
Yeah.
might want to volunteer. Thank you.
With that, we are ready for a vote. So all those who are in favor of resolution R 2023-20, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes 6-0. The next item is council discussion, possible direction to staff regarding critical impact topics from the Joint Council / Planning Commission workshop held June 20th, 2023, presented by the Development Services Director. Still in the hot seat.
Well, it's cool down in here. So thank you for turning the AC. So this is, the following is a report based on the critical topics recognized at the joint work session of the Town Council and Planning Commission. I'm going to cheat a little bit. There were two items that were on the second wave list, but they were talked about extensively from the minutes. So I've included those in your report this evening as well. I'm going to start just by, reiterating that the Town Council had held a joint work session with the Planning Commission on June 20th, just earlier this year. And here's this report based on what was identified as critical impact. I'll start with what I've called item number 1, which is the town core plan and / they were kind of grouped together, parking in the town core. The town core plan was adopted in 2012 and last amended in 2017. Earlier this year, the Planning Commission held a workshop to discuss the town core plan. And upcoming staff will prepare a case file and begin the process for updating the town core plan We've identified at least 2 public input meetings as well as 2 planning commission hearings prior to forwarding a recommendation to the town council, which we've anticipated would come to the town council in February for a recommendation or to consider the planning commission's draft recommendation of the town core plan. The memo details when we would anticipate holding those various meetings and input sessions. And then we've left January, based on this timeline, we've left January open in case something needs to be delved into further and more detail is needed and more consideration is needed.
Could I just quickly interrupt?
Yes.
Luke? You don't have any visuals for this presentation,
I do not. I put the visuals in my report.
but if somebody doesn't have your report, they have nothing to look at.
Yeah. Yep.
Very good, thanks.
I'll continue into parking. Parking is a component
Luke,
of.
just
both-
1 second.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
page 74. of
Yes,
the
sorry.
packet right now. Okay, thanks. Okay.
Great.
All right. So that it looks, so this month we would generate the case file. We'd hold a input meeting in October. Then a planning commission public hearing in November, followed by another input meeting. And then December, the planning commission would hold their second public hearing. And then forward a recommendation at that point or decide to hold additional meetings if necessary. The next item is parking. Parking is a component of both the general plan and town core plan. From the general plan, it's quoted, "There's a shortage of parking in the town core." That's a very succinct and deliberate message if there ever was one. The stated goal from the town core plan states provide for adequate parking within the core area. So based on those things, the town purchased a 0.94 acre property in 2008 for the purpose of public parking. It's located near the existing Foothills Food Bank in the Tamarisk Grove area next to a water storage tank. It can accommodate roughly 85 automobiles. The zoning ordinance contains requirements associated to parking, which is based off of gross floor area and type of use. For example, office, retail, restaurant, assembly, and industrial. Since the creation of the Cave Creek Fire Department, which is managed by Daisy Mountain, the town assumed responsibility of annual fire safety inspections of commercial businesses. A component of this inspection determines the occupant load of commercial spaces. So standing room is given a certain, how many people can fit in a standing area and how many emergency access or exits are required. The same goes for, closed in buildings and structures, restaurants, retail. The town now, since starting a fire department, has now taken over the responsibility for conducting these annual fire inspections. They used to be conducted by Rural Metro. So this gives the town the opportunity to conduct an annual inspection, and that will provide staff information related to floor areas, changes in floor areas over time, whether permitted or otherwise, and help staff gain compliance where necessary. Staff will continue to seek public parking opportunities within the town core and encourage businesses to work together and with staff to accommodate parking opportunities for their patrons. There's no timeline associated with parking. It's obviously an issue and something that we're constantly aware of and working to resolve. There's no one size fits all or magic pill. It's really trying to find parking where we can, encourage businesses to open up parking to other businesses if they're a 9 to 5, office type use, allow public parking in nighttime hours.
Luke, could I add a clarification that with this additional fire code inspection, that also includes exterior spaces? So we'll be measuring the standing room, sitting room of exterior outdoor spaces as well as indoors, not just under roof.
Do we have adequate code to ensure that when a business increases the patron load, there is parking at that business to support that load?
In theory, for properties that follow the proper procedures with permitting and notice to the town of such changes, yes.
Do we have adequate enforcement to make sure that what you just said happens?
This is part of that annual fire inspection. We'll be able to get real time on a yearly basis and monitor changes over time that occur at different businesses.
So if they're over, if they have more patrons than they have authority to serve, and they're down on the parking, what's gonna happen?
Mayor, members of council, the first thing that we need to get our arms around, which we're working, Chief Ford and Ben Carr, the building official, and myself have been meeting to discuss getting all the businesses up-to-date occupant load postings. That's really the first critical thing that must happen. And that's what we're trying to get done as soon as possible with our annual fire inspection. Go in, measure areas, have occupant loads posted. If those loads get exceeded, then the town has every ability to enforce and remove patrons from places if it gets overcrowded at that point in time.
So we've allowed some places to have excess capacity for a period of time. How are we gonna deal with that without getting lawsuits?
That's
Chief Ford has met with staff and we've had very detailed discussions about how that's done and how it's handled. And once the occupancy load is posted, you've got a current site plan. They have to follow the occupancy load and you can ask them to prove how many patrons have entered and exit and come up with the current number. And, you know, if they're significantly over, whoever is doing the inspection is going to know, and you can enforce the regulations at that time.
And just to follow up on that, occupant load really has no direct connection to parking, in that buses of people can be delivered to a place and those buses leave and there's no cars associated with those people. So what we're trying to start with is get our, like I mentioned, get our arms around what are the actual occupant loads of areas that are open to the general public for different businesses.
Could we just poll and ask how many tables and chairs they have and then how many parking spaces they have? Because if you go to a restaurant or you go to a bar, standing room only, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, but the rest of the time, people are going to be sitting down. That's where the parking problem comes in.
Correct. Yes, that's what we look at as part of the site plan and the floor plan for
Right,
these businesses.
And I think that's the
seating
key
areas.
that Luke is saying. It's the site plan. The site plan will be on record and it will be documented for standing or sitting and the number of tables, the chairs, et cetera. And so they might have move around a combination of those, but they still can't exceed a total number. And the site plan is what will become our record on file for that business.
I think we're talking past each other.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is we've allowed people to put outdoor patios. We've allowed people to do all of these things without increasing their parking availability. Many of those have been in place for multiples of years. Coming back and going after those businesses is probably not in the best interest of the town. So the question is, can we just get the numbers of tables and the numbers of chairs? And can we get the numbers of parking spaces? That will identify what the overall parking shortfall should be. And I'm not worried about the standing room only, because that's a problem that's going to continue happening with the party buses that come up here and everything. But I think if we can just find out how many tables and chairs they currently have and how many parking spaces they currently have just throughout the town core, that'll tell us what our parking shortfall is.
And I'm not trying to
Yeah.
be rude or anything.
No,
but I
no,
think the
Mayor,
thought-
Councilman, we understand completely. And yes, we'll do that. There are
Thank you.
some, one of the advantages to the fire code inspections is we will catch earlier and more frequently any non-permitted activities that have, and so this will hopefully eliminate any additions without a permit. We'll catch that and those would have to be removed if they don't have a permit. So that
Yeah,
would
I'm
be
just
helpful.
concerned we don't want to punish the people who've already done what they've done.
How will we control the issue during bike week?
You don't, you live with it.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, they have to come in for a special event permit. And that would be the way that you could control crowds, but basically a special event is a special event and you typically have larger crowds at certain times and you expect that for a short period of time. And that's what you're issuing it for. It's not an ongoing, everyday situation, so.
And luckily for me, someone thought it would be wise to remove special events from the zoning ordinance some time ago and put it in the town code. So the responsibility rests, that's another way of saying the responsibility to approve a special event rests with the council in that case.
But the occupancy is a safety issue. There have
Absolutely.
been there have been fires or many thousands of people back east were killed in World War II sometime that started a lot of this up. So that's a law, just like speeding, murder. It's a law. It's not a town practice on how many parking places you have. So these are two separate issues that have a degree of interface, but they are two separate issues.
Correct. Yes, Mayor, absolutely. I can't stress it enough. It's the town now having the ownership and the responsibility to conduct these annual fire inspections that really gives us added benefit to look at health, safety and welfare of the people that are coming to these businesses. And that's the angle that we're trying to pursue, not close businesses down or do any of those things.
Yeah, we don't want to close anybody down, that's for sure.
Mr. Mayor, your point about two different parallel paths is correct. What Luke is telling you, he is suggesting, and Carrie is suggesting that they are going to develop data through these inspections to identify parking problems. That then presents you, the council, with two issues. One issue is how to provide more parking. And the second, probably less acceptable issue is, do you wish to start issuing citations? And so I think now the challenge now is to get the data. Luke will get you the data. And then as he politely pointed out, it's no longer in the zoning code, it's in the town code, and we have to address it.
Thank you, Bill.
Moving on to item number 2, discussion was had regarding area 10 and 18 plans. The meeting minutes discussed that a plan needs to be developed with accessible uses for the neighbors. I'll start with the general plan was amended in 2010, identifying both area 10 and 18 as mixed use. Mixed use allows for an applicant and owner within that land use area to submit a zone change request to the town. And upon recommendation of the planning commission, the town council can consider rezoning a property to any of the specified zoning categories within our ordinance. Area 18 has 8 parcels remaining, totaling 14 acres that are currently zoned DR 43. Area 10 has 6 parcels remaining that are zoned DR 43. A zone change requests, as I stated, are not guaranteed and are only granted by the town council based on the satisfaction and response to the criteria set forth in the zoning ordinance. What staff, myself personally, over time has seen with land use and zoning is that a piecemeal timeline for development of area 18 is not preferable, nor does it provide certainty to the neighboring residents. Staff would start by contacting the owners of the property owners within areas 18 and 10 and discuss their near and long-term plans, beginning with, I would send out certified letters later this month just to kind of ring the bell and see if anyone wishes to discuss their near and long-term plans. So staff will communicate to the individual property owners. There's 14 in total, 8 in 18, area 18 and 6 in area 10. Some of those are local residents and some are not. What staff would wish to do with these owners is make sure that they understand that they need to consider uses and enhanced development mitigations to address concerns of adjacent residential neighborhoods prior to any potential applications being filed. I think that became apparently clear with the 2 zone change requests earlier, or actually they were filed last year, considered by council earlier this year. So with that, staff will prepare to make contact with those owners and continue to update the town manager of the progress moving forward. Really in this report, it outlines what could occur. Each individual property owner within those areas can submit a zone change request at any time. A group of them could get together and submit a zone change request at any time. Individual property owners may wish not to proceed, and the town council may initiate applications for an amendment. Really what I would say is to anybody that wished to explore or examine, I've had conversations with various owners, and before they submitted anything, I would recommend that they have a meeting with neighborhood, many of whom are behind me this evening, and discuss those things and try to come to an understanding of what would be acceptable for that area in general.
So
That's all.
I do have a question on that. I think during the meeting, we talked about having input from the neighbors, and they would identify things that they could live with. And I think then we said we would see what we could do about changing the general plan to be in accordance with their wishes. So it may be a commercial property that you could, rezone from DR 43 to a commercial property, but we may limit the commercial property type to a specific type, like a doctor's office or something like that. And I think that's what we had discussed. Did I miss the mark there?
I believe what you're referring, it wouldn't be an amendment to the general plan as much as a rezone conditioned on certain things. You can limit uses, you could increase setbacks. Any of those things would be an acceptable methodology through a zone change.
But I thought
conditionally.
that we had tagged the Planning and Zoning Commission to go meet with the neighborhood and find out what was acceptable to them. I believe that's the core of the issue.
I will. I'm looking through the minutes. But I had that earmarked where.
Did you look at the minutes?
Good luck finding that.
To give Luke a couple more minutes here, when the town does an effort like this, this is just a suggestion, and it may not be in the right terminology, but I'm just throwing it out there for the council's consideration. When this type of analysis is done in both a regional and parcel by parcel basis, I would hope there would be an opportunity to maybe take a look at current public rights of way for traffic flow to see if there's anything that would be eligible or from an engineering standpoint makes sense in terms of either changing traffic flow or eliminating traffic flow. There was an idea voiced one evening here at the microphone by a member of the public about theoretically the town maybe buying a couple of private parcels and converting that into a pocket park. And maybe there could be a section of street that could be abandoned to provide a green space over there to kind of reward that part of the town for being in cooperation with a lot of new commercial development the last 20 years, so that it could be a blend of predictable residential use for those that don't want to leave, but exist side by side with commercial. with an understanding of what maybe a new analysis could be for traffic flow, and can we do something about preservation even in an urbanized area that would enhance the lifestyle of the community over there and so forth. So I'm not stating this accurately or effectively, but I was so fascinated by that concept of a pocket park. And I thought if there were two adjoining parcels that the town could purchase for micro preservation and convert it to, obviously not pristine desert, but use desert vegetation and something at a scale that would make sense for a neighborhood, whether it's a swing or sandbox or basketball court or whatever. But it'd be nice if the town could acknowledge the fact that residents have been there since before incorporation and long before the roads up here were paved even. But the fact that clearly Carefree Highway is no longer a 2-lane song, it's 4 or 6 lanes of commercial development designed for income and so forth, and heads west to one of the largest chip manufacturing plants in the United States. So I get it, but maybe we can still do both. And I don't know how that process, but I would just ask staff and ask others on the council if you have some suggestions or ideas. Maybe when this overall analysis is being done, there might be something that would be creative that could be pursued in terms of traffic flow or closing traffic flow or diverting traffic flow or using native plant restoration for traffic corridors. So again, this was not a prepared comment clearly, but
Well, I think it's wide
I just
open.
want to lobby.
Yeah, I think we think that is
Thank you.
part of planning's assignment is come up with a plan. And I'm certainly not going to put any limits on it.
Could we take a 5-minute break? Mr. Mayor?
Yes, do you mind?
No.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and be back at by that clock. 27 after. Councilmember Bunch will be back shortly, but we can proceed here. We'll fill him in. There are no votes here. This is information only.
Okay, Mayor, members of council, as Councilman Rhodes pointed out, discussion was held related to this matter somewhat on page 87 of your packet from the minutes. And thanks to an assist from Carol Perry and Brian Poor on line 274, Councilmember Rhodes stated that he believes this came out of area 10 and 18 issues. This is the context of this is talking about conditional rezoning. He stated that it was talked about getting a plan put together about what is acceptable use given what the neighbors want. He suggested that is critical. So to that end, I've just handed my card to Carol Perry and asked that she contact me and we start that discussion however that proceeds and what that looks like.
Perfect, thank you.
The next item is commercial buffer renaming. Earlier this year, upon recommendation of the Planning Commission, it was recommended to change the name of commercial buffer zone, the commercial buffer zoning category to intermediate commercial. That was denied as part of, if you recall, the cases that would have eliminated the site plan review from the purview of the Planning Commission. Should council desire, staff can generate a case file and prepare public notices to that's a zoning text amendment. So there is enhanced notification with that, meaning we would put it in utility bills, publish the text in circulated newspaper. And once we've done that, then we can schedule a planning commission meeting to make a recommendation. And then because it's an ordinance text amendment, that would take 2 readings followed by a 30-day effective date. And just putting a timeline together, I put that as adopted by February, effective by March of 2024 to get that process done. And that process is outlined on page 76. Yes, thank you, Brian.
Is there enough support to do that?
I'm here asking.
We can't take any, I don't think we can take any votes, but, and we don't, and we're short at least one member. I think I would need to review that item. Do you have the date that happened?
I believe that was second meeting in January. When the three site plan text amendments came. One was in chapter 3, which was where the commission further recommended to rename that from commercial buffer to intermediate commercial. But as far as from the minutes from the work session, that sounded like there was consensus to explore that. So at the least, staff could prepare a case and take it to the planning commission and have a recommendation on changing the name. And then at
Well,
that point, council could consider.
Yeah, I mean, if we just repeat the same thing and go with another no vote, that's a real waste of everybody's time. If there isn't interest at the town council level, it's not going to go anywhere. Because they're the approving body. We are the approving body. And so before we start that, I think we need to see whether there's enough interest on town council to re-bring that up. Yeah, I hope.
May I just comment?
Sure.
I don't believe that there's any action that's needed right here, right now, tonight. What is needed is discovery and then action soon to refine the reasons for the use and the misuse of the term commercial buffer, delineating the wide variety of situations which, using this nomenclature, offered neither commercial nor buffering to commercial applications or residential interests. Narrowing its use, exploring commercial or residential overlays may help. Only then will we naming offer honesty and manage expectations to the people we serve. So I'm not all about pushing hard on this, but what we call it isn't what we really do. And I'd love to see us get honest about that. And I think it's about the underlying land uses that need to be explored and understood.
Well,
Even
this
though
issue is
there-
about renaming.
I understand that.
So the issue
So
you're talking about is much broader than that.
That is true.
Um,
And it's just a comment. That's it.
Well, I mean, if we want another zoning, as I understand it, commercial buffer is in our agreements with the state land department. And it's very messy to mess with that. Is that right?
Correct. So when this was brought about last year, it was imperative that just changing the name was under consideration, not the associated uses permitted under that category.
Yeah.
So you can change the name of a category, but once you get in and start eliminating uses or further restricting uses within that category, a claim could be made for diminution of value by the state land department because of their.
So
their
the way to
side.
get around that, the way to get around that is not just renaming what's already there and have the same thing. It would be to come up with a different classification, a different zoning classification.
And
That would accomplish the purpose you're talking about. Yes.
Thank you. That's what I,
Is there support on
Float out
council
there.
for doing that? Okay, I heard a no down here who, turn your microphones on and let's start down at this end and explore that.
Yes, I think we need to take a look at it.
Before you go too far, you need to maintain the uses that are in the state, the trust land. When we initially defined that stuff, I can remember sitting down in the very end of that thing down there and the council voted 6-0 to make a commercial buffer, get a brand new special use permit if it wasn't used for a year. And my question was, what does the state land department think about that? And the next time it brought back up, it was 7-0 to not mess with that and leave state land happy.
We're not talking about, we're not leaving.
Well, that's
commercial
what he's going, yeah, he's going down, he's mentioned down there about changing the stuff. So I'm just concerned about when we go messing with stuff and open ourselves up to diminution of value under any circumstances.
As I understand the proposal though, is to leave commercial buffer exactly as is. Now, you
Okay.
may want to rename it, but not to make any material changes to commercial
Okay.
buffer. But then I'm detecting some interest in having a zoning classification that is more restrictive and more of a buffer than commercial buffer is. And that we're talking about a new zoning classification that to get around the state land issue with that.
Yeah, I was here when we created Area 10, Area 18, and Area 25. And the reason we did that was to bring the revenue that we've seen the results of tonight, where we can actually afford to pay our bills. And nothing has ever been done that was beyond the major corridors in the community. We set those areas aside. Obviously, we had one use that came to us that would not have been all that effective or not affected the neighborhood that much, and they rejected it out of hand. Now, do whatever you want to do, but I'm not going to go along with it.
Okay. Well, this isn't a vote, but.
I know. I'm just, yeah, I know. I
We
get
see if
that.
there's enough interest to develop staff time towards developing a new classification within the zoning code.
The
That's-
whole point was revenue. After the Great Recession.
Other comments?
I really respect what Ernie has to say about this, and I remember sitting in those meetings in those chairs. And all I'm saying is 6 years on the planning commission, this is a series of words that created more dissonance in this building than almost anything else, because people have expectations for their commercial investment money, and the residents have expectations for a peaceful place to live. And therein lies the rub. So I'd really just like to have a good conversation about that. And I'll abide with what we all come up with, but it needs to be talked about.
Well, we need a proposal more than we need to have something that we can act on or not act on, which is staff time to develop a draft code and then to bring it in and put it through the process and see if it should be adopted.
So we could ask for that tonight.
Yeah, we could put it on the agenda.
Yes.
And ask staff to work on that and put it for a future agenda item. And that's the way that our process works. But
Yeah,
Let's
Mayor,
take-
members of council, as you recall, you were on the planning commission at the time. You brought this up as a discussion item
Yes.
on the commission. And I believe what was born out of that were based on our commercial inventory, where these lands that would have this new zoning classification might reside. And I don't believe that was kind of developed or hashed out more to, are we talking about 8 parcels? Are we gonna, as the planning commission, other commissioners said, are we going to go and draft a whole new ordinance that only applies to 4 to 8 properties? Or,
Yeah.
how does this
And look,
interplay? So that's,
I reject that. We don't have enough property to be concerned about this argument, because we also have redevelopment going on. And you can see evidence of that up our main drag here. So this is to say, when we take an action that affects both a commercial endeavor and our residential zoning, we need to have a conversation about how to care for both the investor and the people who live in town. So what I would love is if planning could work on exploring what do other towns do about this kind of thing? Where are we with best practices on this?
what about just putting stipulations? Because when we rezone, we have the ability to put stipulations. And so you can it's messier because there's not one classification that has all the rules, and then we can look at it and see what it is. Now, every piece of property you have is now a negotiation and
Right.
you're customizing. It's very messy.
It's
And
pretty
Mayor,
messy.
to that point, that's what Scottsdale does. That's Scottsdale's best practice, is conditionally rezoning everything. Every piece of property is basically a zoning ordinance unto itself. Every subdivision, separate zoning ordinance, every commercial
we-
property, separate.
They've got so
requirement.
much money they can afford.
But they, Cave Creek with our remaining inventory of lands, that is a doable and effective way to do it, is look at each parcel that comes in, each group of parcels as they relate to one another, and develop conditions appropriate for what they're asking for and the uses they're asking for.
And then we continue, get somebody who puts in a zoning application and we put neighbor against neighbor. I think it's better to take a look and see if there's some kind of intermediate use that's not what we can, commercial buffer, and not what we call residential, but some other category that limits what can be done there.
It's called multifamily.
Well, the planning commission is not here and Steve Breckner's not here.
Where's my planning commission here?
Yeah.
You have an opinion, Cynthia? Thank you. Cynthia Driscoll is a member of our plan commission,
The vice chair.
vice chair.
Mayor Morris
Is
and
your-
Vice Mayor.
It's a-
Thank you. I'm really not prepared to comment on this further than what the Planning Commission has sent to council in the past. The debates we've had certainly echo the same comments that are made here tonight. It's arduous to create a new zoning category out of nothing. I'm not sure legally that we have a lot of wiggle room with that, but the rezoning and consideration of stipulations with rezoning seems to be a targeted way to do it. If you have specific questions, I'll try to answer them.
So the Scottsdale.
Model.
Yeah, at the time we discussed this at the Planning Commission, my concern was that renaming the commercial buffer without changing the underlying definition of it was really not solving the problem. It may move away from having people expecting to have some kind of buffer between residential and commercial, but it really didn't change the way business was done and what property owners were looking for when they came to the commission with rezoning request.
So I'm hearing at least two options. One option is to create a new classification that for a limited number of properties. And the reworking of people come in on existing properties and redevelop. Or the second one is for a commercial buffer to make each one a separate negotiated rezoning with stipulations. Can you think of any others, Luke?
Don't,
With your current headache, I'm sorry.
No, no headache at all. No.
When when
I-
you get, when the state land trust, isn't there like 120 acres out there that's currently designated commercial buffer?
Correct. State land commercial totals 240 acres, 120 of which is general commercial and 120 is commercial buffer.
So this is a thing that's gonna come up again and again.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
both there really are three options. One is a complete rezoning. Two is to do it case by case basis with stipulations, both of which could impact the state land. I think state land could have a claim because you're affecting the underlying zoning, and both of which could affect what Ernie talked about, a diminution in value. The third option is what the vice chair of the commission said, is to change the name so that there's no expectations. But those are your three options.
Agreed.
So where do we go from here?
I've got notes. I don't want to use the term put a pin in it, but I've got notes, things that I can look at and address and come back to council. It's something I'll definitely, the next time the planning commission is in a room in your seats, that I will bring up and try to glean some direction and from them as well. It's not something that council has to do on its own, make this decision here tonight, obviously. So
But I think Cynthia got the key issue. We want to solve the problem, not just rename the problem.
Yes.
Yeah, rename the problem's easy, but it doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
right,
So-
and really, I mean, commercial buffer from the outset is a misnamed category. I mean, going back to county ordinances of old, and looking at all the various zoning categories, which I've done. I admittedly a zoning category nerd at heart, I guess. But it's from 1995, it should have been referred to as intermediate commercial, not commercial buffer. And that's something I've reported to the planning commission and now to the town council. So that was a mistake, long since passed.
Carrie, can I ask staff then to take on to make something actionable out of this mess, along with talking with who you need to talk to and with the planning commission to make something that we can act on at some point and put this to bed forever?
Don't say forever.
Don't say forever.
Zoning's not forever.
Nothing's forever.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes. The next item, these next several should move rather quickly, fingers crossed. A comment, discussion was had regarding APA training for planning commissioners. Since then, staff has notified the planning commission of the American Planning Association, AZ body, that there's membership and training opportunities, and the town would reimburse those fees associated if they wanted to become members of the APA AZ local chapter, or take any classes. I don't think you have to be a member to take all of the courses that are offered, but the town will definitely reimburse for any of those costs on our commissioners. And then staff will also discuss APA training and membership opportunities as part of the new commissioner onboarding process, which we do anytime a new planning commissioner is appointed by the town council.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to thank Luke for that. And I want to thank you on behalf of Martha Arnold, who's never quit bitching to me about the issue. So
We're not supposed to use names up here.
well, she's one of the pre-town residents, Ernie Wolfouch. And anyway, when I tell her that you espouse this, she will be really happy. And
She will be
and she'll be
overjoyed.
pleasant for a day. So, and she's a dear friend, so I mean that with respect. But I do want to more seriously thank you and thank Luke for this showing up here.
Well, they deserve the credit. I think it's a good idea, but
This
it
is
wasn't
good
mine.
news. This is a good idea. So good job on that.
Thank you. Mayor, on to item number 5, an annual joint meeting, once again at the joint work session held in June. Discussion was entered into regarding an annual joint meeting. Once again, if new commissioners are appointed, council will entertain that in December of each year. Shortly thereafter, the planning staff does an onboarding along with the chair of the planning commission to onboard those new commissioners, something that we've really just recently started doing the last 2-3 years. And that was set in place by a former chairman of the planning commission to do. It used to be you got a mailroom key and a key card and good luck. And we've kind of set a bar of making it a more professional onboarding and getting, a lot of information and all the documents and signing off. I've received my key, I've received this credential and those things. We do that.
I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt. Go ahead. I'll ask the question.
So we hold that new commissioner orientation in December after the town council has appointed its appointees. And then in January, the planning commission holds an annual meeting workshop with legal counsel to go over any changes to state law, anything that may impact their ability as a member of a planning agency. So staff would recommend if you wanted to kind of set aside a meeting date each year for a joint workshop, maybe February would be the most proper time to do so. If there are any new commissioners, they've kind of gotten acquainted with the system and those things. So
Does
that's all.
anybody have objections to that? It's a great idea. We'll turn it over to town staff to schedule that. Another one is by code, the planning commission is supposed to come up with 5 proposed changes every December. Am I saying something that's not in there?
I'm not aware of a requirement that they.
Well, I'll check it out.
Yes.
If they are, let's make sure that happens.
Thank you. That would, okay. Moving on to item 6, sewer hookup requirements. This one is really not not rests in my hands as Development Services Director, but really would be, at such time that an integrated utility master plan is reviewed and adopted, the town's utilities director will provide recommendations to the town council on this matter. As you're aware, the utilities director, Sean Krusweisner, is working with various consultants to develop this integrated utility master plan, which will be coming to council. It talks everything infrastructure related, utility, water and wastewater related, and how those interconnect. And different requirements may come out of that as far as sewer hookups and water availability, all those things. So that will be, I'm not kicking the can there. That'll be Sean's. Item 7, gates on subdivisions and groups of homes. The subdivision ordinance prohibits functional gates on subdivisions and groups of homes. Only an exception to the subdivision ordinance may be granted by the towns who allow gates. So if the town council doesn't want a gate, you have every authority to have them abide by the subdivision ordinance, which prohibits them. So at this time, staff does not recommend amending the subdivision ordinance as it pertains to gates. Item 8, private streets. My same spiel here. The subdivision ordinance prohibits private streets. Only an exception request to allow private streets may be granted through the subdivision plat process. So once again, it could be a case by case if an applicant wishes or desires to have private streets, council can approve an exception request filed by the applicant to allow them. But Hidden Canyon is a good example. They wanted private streets. Staff, commission and council required that they do a public easement overlay over that, which requires the subdivision itself to maintain their private streets, but it also maintains public access on those streets. So in nature, they cannot put a gate up. So
why wouldn't we do that with all subdivisions? Isn't that it sounds like a perfect thing where the town, we're only having so much money that's going to come in through sales taxes. And we have a lot of roads in town.
that is correct. Really, the goal of the subdivision ordinance as it pertains to public streets is continuous access through platted subdivisions. So you don't have dead end streets, dead end roads, one way in, one way out. So that's really why the subdivision ordinance prohibits them in nature in a rural area. Maintaining access, public access throughout is important.
But you've done that with the right of way, haven't you?
That is one way around it, yes. But it took the developer, the applicant, to ask for that exception in that case.
We can't force it, or we can't put it into code where we could force it.
Let me look at that further.
I
I
don't know.
understand now
Maybe
exactly
I'm the
what
lone
you're.
ranger on that, being so financially oriented, but
Well, I don't think you are. And Luke, if they're private streets, they're still built to which standards?
Any street providing access is built to a standard adopted by the fire code. So width, amount of apparatus load that the road can support, driveway grades, the grades of the road, all of those things are are adopted through the fire code and listed in our transportation design guidelines.
So turning radiuses, shoulder widths, all that drainage, all that stuff
Absolutely. Correct.
on private streets.
Correct.
does anyone else on council have an opinion here?
Private roads versus public roads and subdivisions. I can remember as a baby council member in 2005, when I found out that it said there's no such thing as public roads. And I'm thinking, okay, so our founding fathers decided that we had to maintain these roads and we've got no property tax and no way to pay for it. So I would think that we would want as many private roads in subdivisions as is humanly possible.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, because it's ridiculous unless everybody wants to go to the polls and vote a property tax for street maintenance. It's stupid for us to pay for an HOA responsibility.
And this is for subdivisions we're talking about, not for just.
Correct.
Yep.
This is for subdivision. So the silver lining is platted subdivisions, looking at the town. Hidden Canyon is really the last subdivision that we may see for some time, a very long time. So it's not something that we need to address tonight. It's really the way the subdivision ordinance is crafted is a series of, they're really double downs. So you've got gates are not allowed, and then you've got private streets are not allowed, because what we want to go to is if you allow private streets, then why can't I put a gate across it? So that's,
It's
those are
logical.
that's the double down in the subdivision ordinance that's built in.
Yeah.
So you could have a developer ask for an exception to permit gates and ask for an exception to allow private streets. And we've done it. We've approved one and denied the other.
Yeah.
Continental Mountain, if you recall.
It's called discretion.
Correct, which rests with you as part of the exception process of a plat.
Charge an annual fee.
Okay, well, we beat that one to death.
Yes, we did. Good job.
Thank you for allowing me to beat that one to death with you. So here's the two cheat ones, the longer term second wave topics, recognized at the joint work session of the Town Council and Planning Commission. Really, I bring these up because for one, I left not having really direction. And I know that these are going to come up down the road, so I wanted to be clear. The first one is DR 43, large animals on small property. So a lot of discussion was had. Just briefly, ranch uses are permitted on all desert rural zone property, provided the property is at least 2 acres in size, unless the property is a legal non-conforming parcel greater than 1 acre and zoned either DR 89 and DR 190. Of which there are approximately 200 of those properties. So we adopted an amendment to the zoning ordinance some time ago, maybe 8 years ago, that allowed non-conforming properties that were at least greater than 1 acre, but they were non-conforming because they were miszoned, essentially DR 190 or DR 89. So these are parcels largely on the west side that were split or created within county prior to the town annexing out there and essentially downzoning all of that property to DR 190 and DR 89. So we have that safeguard to allow ranch uses on undersized properties. So my ask tonight is some further direction in either modifying the current language without modifying the 2 acre minimum, or if the desire is to consider lowering the 2 acre minimum for ranch uses in properties less than 2 acres.
Yeah,
guess is
I think the context of this was there were a couple property owners that had like 1 acre and they could only have 1 large animal and they wanted 2. I'm just trying to remember the conversation. I believe that was the gist of it.
So once again, if a property is only 1 acre, they cannot have any ranch uses unless they are DR 89 or DR 190, the legal
I think we have
non-conforming.
some people that are back on the west side that are grandfathered in.
And they can have 5 large ranch animals per acre. So there's no, like I said, they're not limited to just 1 in that case.
I don't remember the details of it. All I do remember that the conversation went around. There's a couple property, or not a couple, there's several properties that have around 1 acre. And right now they're not allowed to have, or they all have 1 animal and they've had that animal forever and they want to get a second animal. So I don't know if we should even take it up. I don't know.
Yeah, we need somebody to sponsor it.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Have
So-
you heard that complaint or issue, Luke?
Prior to the adoption of the amendment, that allowed DR 89 and DR 190 properties that were undersized as a result of the county zoning and then the town annexing and downzoning it from 1 acre to 5 acres. I think that really cured a lot of, what ailed different property owners over time. So I haven't, it's, the language, there was some sections of the minutes that talked about the language not being clear on on what ranch uses were and when you were permitted them. I mean, it's what I put in the memo. It's pretty clear. Allowed uses, private ranch, the site must contain an area of not less than 2 contiguous acres under single ownership. And then chapter 2 defines private ranches permitted 5 large and 10 medium ranch animals per acre up to 5 acres. Thereafter, an additional 2 large and 4 is allowed per acre. A private ranch is allowed up to 20 small ranch animals per acre with the exception of pets. So what I came to, because looking at the minutes, it was a little unclear if it was a confusion in the language or what. And after going back and reviewing the language, I don't know if that's what the issue is. So my question then is the 2 acres too high a threshold? Was there an appetite to lower that? Below 2 acres as the threshold. So even 1 acre zone properties, for example, DR 43 and DR 70, which are below 2 acres, minimum lot area, you can have ranch animals if you're above 2 acres. So you could have a DR 43 property, of which we have several, that is over 2 acres. And they would be permitted ranch animals.
Mr. Mayor, I want to point out the fact that former Mayor Bunch is smiling broadly. And I'd like to give the historical reason for that.
Right.
There is different constituencies here in town, as Ernie is well aware of, and a lot of the guys that used to be on this ranch issue 20 some years ago have gone to the big ranch in the sky. But this literally was a crucible issue back in the 80s and even into the 90s, and there were schisms in the community. I don't have any wisdom to offer on this other than when you want to know which way the wind used to blow, look at Ernie. But there is a very strong constituency for people who live on small lots and have an acre next door who will come in here and they'll take time at the microphone to tell you the problem of going below 2 acres. And the sad thing is the early days of Cave Creek before incorporation and early incorporation, we had Scottsdale refugees, not in terms of money, but in terms of people who had a horse or 2 horses. And this was the last place in Maricopa County they could come. But there were some potential abuses in the early days, and some of those were commercial, some of those in their cottage industries are permitted. I would caution anybody to maybe either historically review some of the discussions back at that time. The other thing too that we used to do that's been changed, which I think is a huge mistake, is we used to say acres. We didn't say 43,000 square feet or 89,000 square feet. So we have under 10 acres that are being split even in the present day, because we abandoned the acre definition and went to square footage, which I would characterize as pro-development, but that's fine. It's an adjustment that's been made historically. But all I would say in summary is that if you go below 2 acres, there is a lashback effect of people who are closer to their neighbors, and not everybody who have come from HOAs. We're going to get into the roosters crowing in the morning, and we're going to get into the flies issue and how often the waste has to be removed from the property and so forth, and the emus. And I mean, I think back, Ernie, there was some strange things that would constitute a farm animal. So I just, as a party of one, would just encourage caution on recommending going below 2 acres. So.
And just real quick, and Mayor, to Councilman Argerton's point, that's why the non-conforming DR 89 and DR 190 parcels allowing that threshold where if they were below 2 acres, granting that, because those properties are all surrounded by properties with ranch uses. So it was more of a no harm, no foul. You get that one neighbor that's 1.2 acres that can't have a horse when all their neighbors have barns, corrals, everything, and dozens of horses. So that's the right thing to do, amendment to the ordinance in that case.
Well, it sounds like we have the right language and we have a few that are, but I think we need to have the right language in there and move it towards, I mean, you don't want, the only complaints I've had on this are there too many animals on a small property. That's the only complaint that I have had. I've not had the other complaint.
I've heard it both ways.
No.
It depends on who you talk to. I mean, I don't really have a hard over on this. I mean, we ought to take a look at it, or just have the planning commission take a look at it. And,
Well, unless there's a constituency, I don't see any reason to take a look at it.
Okay.
I think it's a non-issue.
Yeah.
Mayor, if I may, Councilman Oggerton down there was here in the early days as well, and he knows the history on the horse wars and all those things. It's funny that we call ourselves a horse community when other communities around us can have horses on 1 acre. We have to have 2 contiguous in order to make it. It's really funny. But the constituency is varied, as Councilman Oggerton said, and there is no sense in opening up that can of worms. We fixed the part we had to fix about 10 years ago. I think it was when Adam Trink was on the council that we changed that non-conforming stuff that you described. And we fixed that portion of it at that time, and there's no need to mess with it anymore. Just leave it alone.
Well, I think that really true horse owners / lovers know that 1 acre is not enough for a horse. It's too small. And so therefore, I don't think it needs to be changed. Or 1 acre is too small for more than one horse.
Okay, we're ready to
Thank
move
you.
on.
The last one, native plant ordinance compliance. I've being on page 79 of your packet. I gave a detailed overview of the permit review, pre-site inspection and final inspection sign-off processes. The primary issue associated with compliance and the ongoing compliance of zoning requirements is usually attributable to a lack of knowledge or understanding of the town's requirements. So, and that's, really specifically related to new owners or change of ownership over time. And then compounded with, we've had an influx of new residents to the community. And then compounded with the response to 2 recent wildfires, many homeowners responded by removing all shrubs and ground covers on their properties as a fear of wildfire propagation. Not here to debate whether that's rightful or anything else. But I think really the actionable thing to take away from this discussion item from the workshop was that staff just needs to focus more energy providing outreach and education to new owners regarding the natural undisturbed requirements, including the 12-foot native habitat corridor, as well as a Firewise landscaping basics to all residents. And that would be in concert with Chief Ford, Daisy Mountain, and other outside resources. I mean, there's a lot of resources. I was certified as a Firewise property inspector after the fires. Chief Ford made me sign up and go and take a class put on, which is actually quite enlightening. But I think there are things that staff can be a little bit more proactive, whether it's in our newsletters, whether it's a standalone newsletter that goes out, and just offering our services and talents to come out and look at people's property and give them guidance on, native plants are really crucial to, I would argue, keeping wildfires at bay in some circumstances, because with the absence of the native ground covers, weeds have absolutely no competition for that ground to propagate in, grow in, and spread. So, when we see people clear out their land and just leave a cactus and a tree, all they're doing is setting themselves up for future backbreaking efforts to keep weeds controlled and keep weeds at bay, when the simplest solution is just to look at your desert like a fuse and cut the fuse where you can, eliminate overgrowth and things growing into each other in big clumps. And that's usually the most common sense approach for wildfire, and also keeping in compliance with the town's ordinances for undisturbed area. So that's all I would give you on that, is something that needs to be ongoing and really kickstarted with a renewed effort within our newsletters, our social media, our different presence.
I think this was in relation to, there was a side discussion on StinkNet. Because like I got weed control company to come out and spray for StinkNet. Now I have great gaps between all my native plants. The stuff they put on didn't do anything to native plants, but I've got some pretty big bare areas now where all the StinkNet and the invasive species had taken over. So we're going to get into a chicken and egg kind of situation. If we get rid of the StinkNet, we might offer some suggestions on where to go get some native plants to replace it with.
And once again, we do have that resource available to
And
the
some
public.
native grasses to plant because native grasses are less prone to fire.
Yes, we have, and to your point, we do have those resources currently. Landscape companies, landscape associated companies recommended wild seed to go and purchase, and the companies that supply those. So it's just really pushing that out to people instead of having them come into town hall and ask for it and be handed
No, I
it.
mean, if you can put that in the newsletters, I think that solves the problem.
I wonder if we
good
don't
stuff.
need it. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying, that's good stuff. I think just reaching out, letting folks know what the alternatives are is very helpful.
It's apparent to me now that the Firewise and the stink net and the native vegetation are issues that cannot be untwined. They're just like this. And I wonder if we shouldn't have a brochure that combines Firewise with how you can do it and the advantages of the native stuff that has a natural spacing and a low height that is, I saw it down in Tucson at the league. One of the displays, it said that native Sonoran desert is, quote, fireproof because ground fires don't kill everything the way that they're doing now with all this
Fuel.
invasives have come in. So I wonder if we shouldn't have a brochure that we furnish, especially to real estate agents and to when we do a Firewise inspection, or we send it out with utility bills or some way to integrate it with our fire prevention plan.
We do,
Because-
we can do it better,
Yeah.
would be my response. It's part of our new resident packet that's handed out to new residents that come in and request. We have packets available at the Tourism Bureau as well as at Town Hall. And all of that information and material is in there, but we can do, I would expect a much better job at getting it out to everyone.
Maybe we could do a public service thing and like the Sonoran News and Foothills Focus.
That's all I have.
Any other comments from council before we move to public comment? Public comment?
Karen Dietz.
I originally asked to speak because I was very excited about the pocket park idea, by the way. So thank you for that. I have since been redirected. There's no question that Area 18 has put a lot of money in the coffers of this town. And these residents have lived here in that area since before incorporation, most of them. And it is unfair for anyone to make a determination that our lifestyle should be less than. We are very reasonable people. And when it comes to the zoning categories, it is my opinion that either there needs to be a new zoning category or that the existing commercial buffer must have stipulations for uses within 100 yards of a residential property, which includes buffering and landscape screening. I think that is very reasonable. So my area has been treated like the redheaded stepchild for years, and we are very reasonable people. I just met with the builder of the toy barn, who is selling 92 units at $500,000 a piece for a $46 million project. And I can tell you that he treats me with respect. We have negotiated certain compromises. We have been able to work together. I believe it can be done here. But if there is an intention to come into the DR 43 that abuts our residential neighborhood and change all of that in a blanket commercial zoning process, it will be met with fierce opposition by the residents in that area. And any high density retail that is proposed up against our residential neighborhood will also be met with fierce opposition. And I don't even have the words. I was, we've done our part. We don't ask for much. We're certainly reasonable, open to compromise. You can reach me anytime. Very willing to work with you. Please let us do that. We should have a right and a say in how our neighborhood develops. We live there. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Teets.
That completes public comment, Mayor.
Thank you. That concludes this item. We are now on to the last item of the night, which is council discussion and approval of a change order for the Rodeo Grounds restroom project in order to accommodate Maricopa County Department of Environmental Services septic tank permit conditions for an additional amount of up to $28,189.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I was asked by my boss earlier today to try to do this with a smile. As you're aware, earlier this year, the town put out requests for qualifications and awarded a contract to Building by Don Fredericks to construct the rodeo ground restroom and associated septic area for a price at $387,000 or not to exceed $387,000. That more than covered the budgeted amount over the past 2 years to accommodate that. The town prior to this had commissioned a septic system design for the rodeo grounds using an 8,000 gallon tank, which more than met the demand quantities of what the restrooms and the other existing sinks on the facility in the cantina and the Stockman's area. However, once county reviewed it, they mandated that we use a 12,000 gallon Xerxes septic system, which is manufactured, I believe, in Pennsylvania, and shipped out here, which would have essentially taken the $80,000 price tag associated with the septic and doubled it. The town and its consultant, the consulting engineer, went back and forth with Maricopa County. Ultimately, a variance was applied for through the county and granted. And the compromise, I put compromise in my memo to you, but it was not necessarily a compromise. It was a mandate that you will use a 10,000 gallon tank from a company out of California. It's trucked out, it's installed with a crane put together, and that increased the price by $28,189. So what I've done in my action item request tonight, I'm asking the town council to approve an additional expenditure of $28,189 to cover the cost difference of the Maricopa County Department of Environmental Services required septic tank for the rodeo grounds. Once again, the original contract for the restrooms was approved at an amount not to exceed $387,000. The increase, if approved, would bring the total amount of the job to $415,189. And lastly, an increase of $28,189 is still below the total expenditure limit budgeted over FY23 and FY24, which that number was $700,000. And then just further food for thought, the other bidder, the next closest bidder was over double the amount of the original contract bid with Building by Don Fredericks. So, and so with that, I'll answer any questions, Mayor.
No questions. This has public comment. Okay, this is financial, but first we'll need a motion.
I'll do that. Move to approve the change order for the Rodeo Grounds restroom project in order to accommodate Maricopa County Department of Environmental Services septic tank permit conditions for an additional amount up to $28,189.
Second.
I'll second that.
You got a third.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bunch,
Yes.
Councilmember Elkama,
Yes.
Councilmember Rhodes,
Aye.
Councilmember Algerton,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Royer,
Yes.
Mayor Morris.
Aye. Ayes have it. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
Everybody in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Meeting
Thank you, Mayor.
adjourned. Thank you, audience.
Thanks. Bye.